Welcome to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to A Fork in Time. This is Chris Capola, and I am joined today by Robert Koshu. Koshu, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. This is a near and dear topic. We're going to do a great fork because, like Don, I am a native Houstonian and cut my teeth on Texas history. And so what better way to do it than to do something like this?
And so we're going to discuss in a second the fork. I sure hope they know their history better than they know their barbecue.
Hey,
so
now that's the second most serious thing in Texas besides our history is our barbecue.
So, Robert, do you want to go ahead and set up the fork a little bit?
Sure. So our fork is Texas expands southward is the title, but our fork is going to be this. In the real history, let me explain what happens. In 1824, Mexico decides they need to settle up their northern territory of Texas. So two people, impresarios, Moses Austin and his son Stephen F. Austin, finishes it because Moses dies. They become land impresarios along with some other people, and they establish American colonies in what we think of nowadays as East Texas. Think just slightly to the west of Houston, down to the Gulf Coast, and then going back towards Louisiana. Not that far north, really not much further north than what we call today Livingston, not much further north than that. And there's a small sliver that kind of runs almost to San Antonio, but San Antonio was really Mexican Texas at that point. The colonies in Anglo-American colonies that moved in were mainly the western edge of it was Gonzales and Victoria and Goliad, and then moving east.
So talk for a little bit. And we did, Don and I did an episode on kind of the split up of Texas. Talk a little bit about this area.
Yeah,
as I understand it, this is almost like Western Louisiana.
It is. It's western, not swampy except down towards Beaumont, but it's really rolling hills, pine trees. It is. If you're thinking Texas and your picture of Texas is the desert and the mountainous area, that is not this part of it. It always cracks us up when real Texans watch certain movies and they show this desert area as being all of Texas, and it's like, no, not at all. Matter of fact, the Battle of San Jacinto, which occurs in 1836 April, actually occurs next to a swamp.
Okay.
And that's where the final part of the Battle of San Jacinto occurs, in the swamp, where basically the Texans go a little crazy and say, remember the Alamo, remember Goliad, and they kill about 600 Mexicans at the end of it. So the Texan Revolution happens. Texas establishes its own republic. Texas Republic only had 3 presidents. One of them we had twice. Sam Houston, the hero of San Jacinto, become elected. He follows a path towards we want to merge with the United States. The United States does not want to touch Texas at this point.
Why not?
Mainly because of the Southern slavery issue was a big part of it. And Sam was kind of thrown back by that because there is a lot of historical theory that Andy Jackson, who was good friends with Sam Houston, basically gave Sam a load of change and said, go down to Texas and take care of that thing for me. There's a lot of talk that right before the Battle of San Jacinto during the Runaway Scrape, several American Army units, quote unquote, deserted and joined up to help out. So Sam was kind of taken aback by this. So that's fine. We'll just make our own republic. Sam portrays, he tries to seek reconciliation with the Mexicans and the Indians. He does not do well in that instance because, Texas didn't like the Mexicans or the Indians. Now, granted, the Indians, particularly the Comanches, did nothing to help themselves. They had a peace treaty signing outside of San Antonio. Something results in what's called the Treaty House fight, where basically the long and short of it is they bring in some captives that the Comanches had and said, we'll trade these for so much gold. The Texans said, are you crazy? And then at that point, the chief says, well, how about no captives and I take all your gold? And the Texas Rangers, who were present to provide security for this house, for this meeting, they don't take kindly to it and they kill all the Mexicans. Or all the Indians at that. Sorry, all the Indians at there. Mm-hmm. So this is Mira B. Lamar University in Beaumont, named after him. He founded Texas Higher Education as well. He's president. Everybody figures out Lamar's a little bit on the crazy side because, yeah, we can't fight this many people all at once. We got to kind of consolidate. Sam runs again. He becomes president a second time. During his second term, true negotiations begin with the United States. Anson Jones becomes last president of the Republic of Texas, and he successfully negotiates with Polk, James Polk, who Polk then Polk's whole deal is manifest destiny. He is going to expand America to the Pacific Ocean, from Oregon down to Mexico. He wants the American continent to be his. And so he annexes Texas. Texas, of course, comes in under great deals. Not only do we get the ability to talk into five, which you and Don covered very well, by the way. It was a great episode. Go listen to it, people. But Texas also says, hey, we get to keep all of our public land, stays ours. So we have state forests, not just national forests, but we have state stuff owned by us. And by the way, y'all are going to pay off our debt for us. Thank you very much. So Texas becomes part of the Union. Mexico takes great offense to this, partially because of Texas, the old boundary of Coahuila, the northern Mexican state that borders Texas and Texas. Mexico considered to be the Nueces River, which, as Don pointed out, dumps into the Gulf right around Corpus Christi. The Rio Grande River is what Texas says is the southern boundary. There's about 200 to 300 miles there, but the most identifiable landmark that everyone will know in that area is the King Ranch. Matter of fact, if you drive from Corpus Christi down to Brownsville through the Nueces Strip, you're going to drive through the King Ranch.
Okay.
So that's really something everybody like, oh, hey. Okay. So, of course, we force the issue a bit, the United States. We send Zachary Taylor, old rough and ready. He sets up a fort called Fort Texas, right on the Rio Grande border across from Matamoros. And let's just say the American soldiers might have got their feet wet once or twice. Fishing, just looking at things, but, they got their feet wet. Mexico took advantage of that. Guns fire off at the fort, the siege of Fort. Taylor raises a real army. The Congress goes to war, and we're in the Mexican-American War now.
And there was a one-term congressman from Illinois who put forward a resolution to say, wait a minute, we want to see these boots. We want to see if they're wet. We want to determine where these American troops were when they were fired upon. That's Abraham Lincoln. And his opposition to this war kind of made sure he was a one-term congressman and would never be heard from again.
Yeah. It's a little thing called the Civil War happens, which, So you move forward. Zachary Taylor goes through. He goes into northern Mexico from Texas, gets to a point called Buena Vista, fights Santa Anna. In reality, Santa Anna leaves in the middle of the night. Zachary Taylor claims great victory and rides that to the White House at some point in the future. Well, that doesn't take care of Mexico because there's this character. He is probably one of the most interesting characters in all of North America, and we'll talk about him a little more later. Most people know him as Santa Anna. His true name is Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, hero of Mexico.
If you list all of his names, this needs to be a 2-part episode.
Yeah, well, there is that. But his most common thing, he is the Napoleon of the West, is how he refers to himself. And most people make the comment immediately thereafter, Napoleon only took power twice. Santa Anna did it 5 times. So matter of fact, one of the most prized possessions in the U.S. Army is Santa Anna's wooden leg that he lost at one point, and they captured at the Battle of Buena Vista. So he goes, he runs, they take care of it. We decide, you know what, Winfield Scott.
As I understand this, Polk, being from the land of actual barbecue, sees Taylor as a threat. And Polk basically sidelines him.
Oh, he does. Absolutely. Well, Polk, he had ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor had ambitions on the presidency. Matter of fact, he eventually becomes president. But he had definite ambitions. So he gets sidelined. Winfield Hancock, the general-in-chief of the U.S. Army. Winfield Scott. Sorry, I always get, because there's also a Winfield Scott Hancock who becomes very big in the Civil War. Winfield Scott, he decides that, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to invade Mexico from Veracruz, which is down southern part of, about middle of almost to the Yucatan Peninsula if you're cutting straight across, but it's on the mainland, not on the Yucatan. And then we're going to march straight to Mexico City. By the way, most people at the time thought this was crazy.
Why did they think this was crazy?
Because for the first time ever, you're going to cut yourself off from all your supplies, and you are going to march straight across a foreign country with guerrillas hiding behind every hill, and they know the land, and you're not going to have supplies, and you're going to march from the coast to the middle of Mexico. Mexico City is very, very much in the middle of the country, and you're going to go there.
So this was one of the first modern amphibious operations that even correct. Thought about or attempted.
Well, at that scale, where we're going to land on a foreign shore and we're going to do it. And so he lands at Veracruz and he starts marching, and he takes along some rather famous people with him. Pierre Gustave Beauregard, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Ulysses Sam Grant, the aforementioned Winfield Scott Hancock, James P. Longstreet, and his aide-de-camp, Robert E. Lee, who is basically his go-to guy. So they all accompany him on this march. They get all the way to Mexico City. Basically, the Mexicans capitulate. There's a man named Trist there who negotiates the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Basically, the U.S. agrees to accept New Mexico, Arizona, California. Texas is totally given up, plus whatever's agreed north of that that was kind of funkily attached. And in essence, we'll go away. We're going to give you some cash, and we're done. Then the fighting ensues over how these new states get incorporated into the Union. And that becomes a precursor to the Civil War, actually. Now, interestingly enough, in the real history, several of the officers who accompanied Scott, including Ulysses S. Grant, thought this was a quote-unquote unjust war, that it basically was a land grab. So that is the real history.
Okay.
Just to kind of give you a very quick, and there's a little group, we will mention them now. During this march, desertions in the United States Army actually hit almost 10%. There was a very group who was very thought of, mainly Irish Catholics, the St. Patrick's Brigade, that became known as the San Patricios. Not only did they desert, they kind of joined the Mexican army. They ended up getting captured in the Battle of Mexico City at Chapultepec, which is a big fortress outside of Mexico City. And about half of them get hung at the end of the day.
And we're gonna call back to this group.
Oh yes, most definitely.
So you've talked a good bit about what is our fort comes, what is our fork?
So when Santa Anna left Buena Vista, he kind of fled, and then he got contacted by the U.S. that said, hey, we'll give you cash. Go get this thing settled where we can just get the land we want and we'll go away. Santa Anna took the cash, raised an army, and fought Scott all the way from Veracruz, basically to Mexico City with it. Our fork is going to be Santa Anna makes a different decision. Mm-hmm. Scott arrives in Mexico City without a lot of opposition, some along the way. So the San Patricios still desert. They do fight because, who wants their country invaded? And Scott arrives in Mexico City and he finds Santa Anna sitting in the presidential palace saying, let's talk.
And what do they talk about?
Well, they decide that, you know what? I'll take over part of the country. You let me be governor of the country. And we'll let you have not only New Mexico, Arizona, California, and of course we'll give you Texas because what the heck, we've already lost it anyway. And by the way, please keep me away from any Texan while I'm here. because the Texans, there was a contingent of Texas Rangers that rode with Scott all the way over. They had fought with Zachary Taylor, and then they boarded the ships, came down, and rode with Scott into Mexico City. And they were not overtly fond of Santa Anna for some odd reason. Something about the Alamo, the Goliad Massacre. They weren't his best friends. So he was like, three conditions here. I get to be leader, keep me away from the Texans, and let me keep my position of power along with all my friends. And Chris, I think that's your cue to talk about who his friends were, because Santa Anna was far from a common folk when it comes down to Mexico.
This is kind of why we were talking about the San Patricios. When we first, actually, this topic got discussed on the Split Up of Texas episode and as an idea. And when I got thinking about it, the first thing I thought about was there's absolutely no way this can work. And the reason I say that is there are not enough people to do what we do in the other territories, which is move in Anglo settlers and move out whoever's there. There's not enough people. There's not enough Anglo settlers to do that. The reason we talked about these San Patricios is the definition of an American to the average American at this point means Northern European, almost like your country has to border the North Sea. These Irish immigrants were coming over. This happened right at the time of the potato famine. They were coming over. They were joining up in the army. And the reason so many of them deserted is they were so mistreated as Catholics in the American army that they looked at the other side and said, they will actually treat us better. That's why they walked.
Well, the Mexicans were actually recruiting them during the war.
And frankly, the United States didn't really help their own case. But so that's why I didn't see annexing or bringing in that much more of, especially bringing in the entire nation of Mexico as an issue. In the kind of negotiations in Mexico City when we did capture it, in our timeline, Robert, you want to use your quote from Calhoun?
Yeah, so there was actually a movement to put forth all of Mexico into at the end of the war. The Congress actually debated it slightly, and it got shut down, number one, because nobody wanted to deal with the slavery piece. But number two, South Carolina Senator John C. Calhoun, who is one of the most strident state rights senators ever. He said that absorbing Mexico would threaten U.S. institutions and the character of the country. An exact quote, "We have never dreamt of incorporating into our union any but the Caucasian race, the free white race. To incorporate Mexico would be the first instance of the kind of incorporating an Indian race from more than half of the Mexicans are Indians, and the other is composed chiefly of mixed tribes. I protest against such a union as that. Ours, sir, is the government of a white race. We are anxious to force free government on all, and I see that it has been urged that is the mission of this country to spread civil and religious liberty over all the world, and especially over this continent. It is a great mistake."
So, what state was he from?
South Carolina, the hotbed of states' rights.
And he said that from the very beginning, the United States had never intended to have anybody but the free white race in it, correct?
That is correct.
Were free white people the majority in the state of South Carolina when he said this?
There were about 35% white, and the other 65% were African-American slaves.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
Okay, just making sure we understand that. So, yeah. And so this basically, in the discussion we had, you could buy off the Calhoun opposition by promising the extension of
the fork occurs because Santa Anna takes the cash and decides to sit in the presidential palace. He doesn't really raise an army. The army that existed in Veracruz and the other parts were not, until they got close to Mexico City, they weren't fighting Santa Anna. Okay. They were fighting other generals and other pieces. And so in this fork, Santa Anna doesn't even come out of Mexico City to march. He doesn't even raise an army. He takes the cash and sits on it, pays off. Maybe he pays off all his upper class Spaniard. We'll discuss that in a moment. Yeah. People to go along with this plan. Scott arrives there. Santa Anna sitting in the presidential palace saying, "Let's talk." Scott hears this from Calhoun. Scott is a good Virginian who, by the way, also had matter of fact, he ran as a Whig, if I remember correctly, on the party and lost after Polk was president. And so he has aspirations as well. He looks at it and says, if I take this and become military governor of Mexico, I ride home the conquering hero like Andrew Jackson and George Washington and Sam Houston. And I can ride this to the presidency.
Okay.
And he goes to Calhoun and he says, "Hey, let's talk for a minute. There is this upper middle class group of Spaniards, or upper class."
Not even upper middle.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as middle.
Upper. Yeah, and in Spain, there really isn't. Even today in Mexico, there's not a middle. But he goes and he says, I can get them on our side. And there's this southern part of Mexico that is down south. In essence, everything south of Mexico City that is fantastic agriculturally. It is citrus, and it is rice, and it is grain, everything almost but cotton, but everything else. It is fantastic growing land. And Mexico had gotten rid of slavery when they became independent of Spain. Kind of a sticking point in with the Texan colonization, but they worked around it. But it was a workaround. 99 years of servitude. That was the longest you could serve. Never mind, everybody died around 50, but 99 years of servitude. But they we'll let that part of Mexico be slave. The kind of northwestern corner, the Baja Peninsula, which is nothing but a big beach basically. Mm-hmm. So not much is there. There are two sections or four current states, or they're called administrative districts in Mexico. They don't really have states, of Sonora, Chihuahua, Sinaloa, and Durango. They are in essence mountainous deserts. They look like West Texas.
They look like all of those movies you made fun of.
They do. They did. and you know what? We'll let them be free because you can't grow anything in there anyway. Mm-hmm.
Right.
but it has loads of silver in it.
So
we get the silver.
This is one of the things, yep. I've always thought about and discussed is the economics of these different areas, even mm-hmm. in the United States, where you had agricultural land that would support large land holdings. Lo and behold, those areas adopted slavery. Yep. In the areas that did not, that may have had small holding or that would have had other means of economic activity, did not have it there. So in these kind of Western areas, they have a lot, and this was very important to the Spanish, and I do say Spanish because that's, who developed it, mm-hmm. economy of New Spain at that point, the mining of these areas. And yep. If you know anything about 19th century mining, it's a dangerous job.
It's a dangerous job today. Yes. and that just think about doing it with none of the quote unquote standard safety measures we work in today. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So almost from a hard, cold perspective, you want to rent that labor rather than own it because it's not going to be around very long. Just yep. being perfectly honest. So what we are talking about and what Robert alluded to a couple of times was the social structure of the Spanish Empire in the Americas. And I do talk about the Spanish Empire because the people we're talking about, Santa Anna in particular, but just about everybody else who's important in Mexico at this time, was born in New Spain. Santa Anna plays a role in Mexican independence from Spain. So we're talking about people that grew up in the Spanish Empire. When independence comes about, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. The mm-hmm. people that ran Mexico were what is known as criollos. They were 100% Spanish. They could trace every ancestor back to Europe, back to Spain. That is who took over Mexico when it became independent. These people, and you mentioned Santa Anna as the ultimate.
Santa Anna, for all the I love Mexico and Mexicans, mm-hmm. which is what he loved to stand by. Yeah, Santa Anna, how much he loved his Mexicans and his Indian soldiers, for mm-hmm. lack of a better term, because a lot of them were Indian soldiers. Mm-hmm. He loved them so much that he basically destroyed 5 divisions of them, taking the Alamo. Mm-hmm. When he had to, if he'd have sat around and waited, rumors has it he got bored with the mistress he picked up in San Antonio. If he had hung around and waited, the siege guns that basically would have flattened the walls to the Alamo mm-hmm. were due the day after the March 6th final day of the siege, where basically anywhere from 1,600 to 5,000 Mexican soldiers were lost. Santa Ana's casualty counts were, his reports back to Mexico City were, we lost 80 with 600 Texans dead. And most Texans laugh at that. The legend is 5,000 soldiers lost. Probably not. Somewhere between 1,800 to 1,600 is a really good number. But considering you were fighting 180 guys, you shouldn't have gotten that beat. You shouldn't have. One of his general's exact quotes was, "Another loss like this will be the end of us." And so he had no. The love for the Mexican people was love to be used for what I could get out of them.
And now this independent country of Mexico is not going to happen. It's gone. But I can probably set myself up with a nice latifundi.
Yep.
And all of my friends can. And they can keep running things the way we have been. And what we discussed was kind of a similar proposition to that was presented to Sam Houston and Moses Houston when they did come into the United States or come into Texas, which is you will accept us, in this case, the United States, in that case, Mexico, as the political leadership. Kind of almost you will show us fealty. You will nominally practice our religion. At this point, it was some version of Protestantism. In the case of Texas, yes, they did have to bend a knee and claim to be Catholic, and you will be allowed to maintain your position, your economic hold over these new areas. Is that a fair statement?
That is a very
hold on one second. Having a little couple of difficulties.
There we go. That is a very fair statement. Apologies. Very, very fair statement. That yes, he basically says, hey, you do good by me, I'll do good by you. We'll set it up. And guess what? We're all businessmen here. We can all make money.
So that's the situation. And we've talked, and we're going to play this as a two-parter. If you know American history, just taking the northern part of Mexico led to a lot of issues. So we're going to come back later and have another episode where we discuss how does this change what happens down the line. So do you have any other thoughts before we close this one?
We end up with, just to kind of picture it, if you look at a map of the state of the nation of Mexico, what we're saying is that the Baja, Sonora, Chihuahua, Sonora, and Durango will all come into the Union has free territory.
Okay.
Everything else can be slave. That's how we got Calhoun on board. Because guess what? Hey, we're going to let you have the agricultural parts. Scott being good Virginian and slave owner, and
the places where this even makes sense to do it.
Yep. And we're going to basically take this over as a colony of the United States territory. Texans get to manage it, but specific Texans, the guys who were more level-headed. Sam Houston is a good example. Sam Houston knew that he could not kill Santa Anna. Santa Anna was captured the day after the Battle of San Jacinto and brought before Houston. Of course, Santa Anna, just to show his arrogance, he walks up to Santa Anna. The Texan army around him is screaming for his head on a platter. Kindly.
Yeah.
He is found hiding in a private uniform with a coat over him several miles away from the battle. Don described the Battle of San Jacinto probably about 5 to 10 miles away. I'd have to run a map to see exactly. But Santa Ana capture site is actually a separate marked area.
Okay.
Further along the ship channel, about halfway between the Sanderson Monument and the bridge, there's a little tunnel called the Washburn Tunnel, which goes under the ship channel between Galena Park and Pasadena.
Okay.
And on top of that tunnel is the Santa Ana battles capture site.
Okay.
He gets thrown back. He doesn't even identify himself. He just kind of sneaks into the camp and into the area where they're holding the Mexican soldiers. And they all start saluting him in El Presidente. And somebody realizes who they got at that point, drag him in front of Houston. And of course, his first words are, "Congratulations, you have captured the Napoleon of the West."
Mm-hmm.
That pretty much needs to tell you everything you need to know about how he viewed himself.
Okay. Because again, you talk about Texans administering this. Texans are still settling Texas.
That is correct. Yeah, we've settled that eastern part, but we're arguing over we're trying to figure out how to make the rest of it happen. There's still, the Comanches are running wild. The Comanches really don't get settled down until the 1850s or so, late 1850s, and they actually make a huge comeback after the Civil War because we were distracted.
So that's a situation we're in for now. And we'll come back for another episode to kind of, as Don likes to say, chase this furry little woodland creature a little bit further. So hope everybody will have a chance to listen to that episode. For right now, this is Chris and Robert signing off.
Thanks for listening to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast. Learn more and provide feedback by visiting our website at www.aforkintimepodcast.com. Connect to us on Facebook at facebook.com/aforkintime or follow us on Twitter at AFIT Podcast. If you want to support the show financially, visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/aforkintime. We hope you will join us next time.